Right now, I'm going to show you the exact psychological trick that separates billionaire winners from broke gamblers. It's called loss aversion, and it controls every financial decision you'll ever make. Here's the test. Would you take a coin flip where heads you win $200 and tails you lose $100? Most people say no, but mathematically you should always take that bet. Your brain just failed you. And not because you're dumb, because of a Nobel Prize winning discovery by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called prospect theory. They discovered that losing $100 hurts about twice as much as winning $100 feels good. Your brain is literally wired to avoid losses more than it seeks gains. So here's what happens. You walk into a casino, you lose $100. That pain is intense, so you chase it. You double down. You convince yourself the next bet will fix everything. That's called the sunk cost fallacy. The gambler throws good money after bad, hoping to escape that loss pain. But walk across the street to a corporate boardroom. Warren Buffett uses that same loss aversion differently. He doesn't avoid the bet. He avoids permanent loss of capital. That difference changes everything. During the dot-com bubble, everyone was euphoric about tech stocks. Buffett stayed out. Not because he was scared, because he didn't understand the businesses. For him, risk wasn't volatility. Risk was permanently losing money in something he couldn't evaluate. While others lost everything, Buffett's company stayed profitable. Same psychology, completely opposite outcome. So how does the billionaire brain actually work differently? It comes down to something called a reference point. People don't evaluate outcomes in absolute terms. We judge everything relative to a mental baseline, and here's the key insight. That reference point is movable. Your brain processes gains and losses differently. Losses trigger threat responses. Gains trigger reward responses, but much weaker. Most people use a fixed reference point. Their current situation. Make $50,000 a year? Anything below feels like a loss. Anything above feels like a gain. But billionaires don't think that way. They control their reference point. They anchor it to value, not emotion. When Buffett looks at a company, his reference point isn't the stock price. It's intrinsic value. If a business is worth $100 and sells for $60, that's an opportunity, even if it drops to $40 tomorrow. The average investor sees a loss. Buffett sees increased margin of safety. That's the difference between gamblers and winners. Gamblers have emotional reference points. Winners have analytical reference points. Research confirms this. A study from the German Institute for Economic Research found that wealthy individuals actually take more risk than poor individuals, but only when they understand their advantage. So let me ask you something. What's your reference point right now? Are you measuring decisions against what you paid, or against what something is actually worth? That distinction decides everything. Because this isn't just about individual decisions. It's about your entire system. Billionaires use mental accounting differently. They separate money into buckets, one for capital preservation, one for growth, and one for speculation. Each bucket has a different purpose, a different reference point, and a different tolerance for loss. The gambler puts everything into one bucket. Every loss threatens the entire system. But the billionaire expects losses in the speculative bucket. Those losses don't trigger panic. They don't contaminate the rest. This is containment versus contagion. So Buffett didn't get lucky. He rebuilt his psychological relationship with risk. He uses the same loss aversion you do, but he anchors it to value instead of emotion. And he segments risk instead of gambling everything on one outcome. The gambler says, "I need to get back to even." The billionaire asks, "What's the probability of permanent capital loss given what I know right now?" You have the same brain wiring as Warren Buffett, same biases, same instincts. The only difference is the framework you're using. But here's where this gets even more interesting. How much should you actually bet on each decision? Because knowing when you have an edge is one thing. Knowing how much to risk is what separates survival from ruin. In 1962, a mathematics professor named Ed Thorpe walked into a Las Vegas casino with a system to beat blackjack. Not luck. Math. Thorpe asked himself a question that billionaires obsess over. Not, should I take this bet, but how much of my money should I risk? He discovered something called the Kelly criterion, a mathematical formula that tells you exactly how much to bet when you have an edge. And it changed gambling, investing, and risk forever. Let's make this simple. Imagine you find a coin that lands heads 60% of the time, tails 40%. If heads, you win even money. How much of your bankroll should you bet? The Kelly formula gives an exact answer: 20%. Here's the terrifying part. Bet 21%, and you will eventually go broke. Bet 19%, and you grow slower than possible. That formula marks the precise boundary between intelligent risk and financial suicide. Now here's where history gets interesting. In 1968, Ed Thorpe sat down to dinner with a 37-year-old investor named Warren Buffett. Thorpe looked at Buffett's track record: 30% annual returns for 12 straight years. That night, Thorpe told his wife, "That man is going to be the richest person in the world." Why was he so confident? Because Buffett wasn't just picking great companies. He was sizing his positions perfectly. But here's the key detail most people miss. Buffett doesn't use full Kelly. No successful billionaire does. They use fractional Kelly. Full Kelly maximizes growth, but volatility is brutal. Half Kelly gives most of the growth with far less stress. Quarter Kelly is even smoother and still beats almost everyone. Even Ed Thorpe admitted something important. Losses hurt him psychologically more than equivalent gains helped. Even though he invented the math, even the best minds feel loss aversion. So here is the complete billionaire system. 3 parts. Part 1. Set your reference point to value, not emotion. Ask what something is actually worth, not what you paid or how you feel. Part 2. Separate your capital into mental buckets with different risk tolerances. Never put emergency money in the same bucket as speculation. Part 3. Size every position based on your edge and your potential loss. Not your gut, not your fear. The math, that's it. Same loss aversion you started with, same brain wiring. But now you have what billionaires have, a system that turns bias into an advantage instead of a weakness. Ed Thorpe ran his hedge fund for 29 years, 29 consecutive profitable years. Not because he didn't feel fear, but because his system accounted for it. If you watch this far, you're in the top 5%. That's not luck. That's you choosing to think differently about risk. If you're going to apply this framework, hit the like button. Leave a comment telling me where you'll use this first, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.